Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Has everybody had a nice breakfast? Oh. Did you have a big dinner last night? Did you enjoy the Persian show? The music, the dancing, entertainment, good food? Great. Okay. Well, today's session has A and B, two parts. The first part is how to create wealth for yourself. We have a real estate maven from Washington State, and he's going to divulge his secrets and how to build wealth through real estate, investing in Mother Earth. I don't know whether any of you attended the WZCC session on Sunday, but we had Dario Shirani explain how he created his wealth through real estate. And he said location, location, and location. Mr. Dabestani is going to explain his secrets besides location, location, location. We have Mr. Arda-e-viraf Minocherhomjee. He's a private equity investor extraordinaire, which means he's high above average on Wall Street. He's received accolades and recognition from the best of the capitalists in Wall Street. Our purpose today is to also educate and not to preach. So we're going to have Tehemtan Arjani, our CPA extraordinaire. He's going to tell you if you have assets in India or Iran or Pakistan, how to report them to the IRS. And he's going to show you ways and means to lower the taxes on those properties and assets. So before we get into our session today, we talked about location, location, location in real estate. Let me tell you a story. It's very important. Is anybody born before 1930? Has anybody read up on the Depression, the Great Depression? Has anybody heard of the Dust Bowl, the drought? Well, when we had the drought in the United States in the 1930s, the times were terrible. So Franklin Roosevelt sent his journalists to interview two families on the farm that had become dust bowls. The farms were the breadbasket of America. In fact, they were the breadbasket of the world. They still are today. But they had turned into dust bowls because there was no rain. So this journalist came and interviewed one of the farmers, and he says, how have you fared during this Dust Bowl years? And they said, it was very, very hard and very, very tough, but we are survivors, and we will survive, and we have our seeds and everything ready, and when the rain comes, we'll be ready and grow our crops, and we look very positive and optimistic for the future. And then they interviewed the second family, and it says, how did you fare during the Dust Bowl? And they said, oh, we did extremely well. We had no problem at all. I said, how did you manage to do it? I said, well, we ate all our seeds. Ladies and gentlemen, the first principle of investing is don't eat your seeds. Don't lose your capital. Making mistakes when you're investing is the biggest reason why people do not accumulate wealth. So I'm going to start with my friend, Mr. Dabestani, and he's going to give us a little bit of background of how he got started with economics at Tehran University, what motivated him, and what made him come to Washington State and pursue higher education in pursuit of happiness and wealth. Alayar?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Before I start my talk, I have to sincere thanks to my Parsi brothers and sisters. As you see me here, I was one of the students of the schools that you guys funded in Iran. And was educated, you paid for the teacher, everything, and you took off the jizya from us, and many, many other things through Minocherhomjee that you did. And I want to have my sincere appreciation to all the parties. And anything that we do, I don't think we can repay all the debts that we owe it to you guys. Well, first of all, these are my own opinion, frankly. I started from zero when I came from Iran, practically. And so the timing and situation was quite different those days. I came to Canada in 1972. But before doing that, to answer your question, Kavasji, I finished my MA in the University of Tehran, and then I wanted to pursue my education for my PhD. Those days, we did not have PhD courses in Iran. Therefore, I applied to come to US or England or UK, and although I got the admission, however, I could not afford the tuition. So a friend of mine that I was working in a bank, he said, why don't you go to Canada? And so I applied for Canada, didn't know nothing about it. But why I started of economics was when I passed my university exams, or we call it concours in Iran, I was admitted in for the physics and mathematics and economics. And because of the, frankly, poverty and the needs and being young, very sensitive to the situation and everything, I said, well, I'm going to go to economics. Hopefully I can do something to the other people. That was my main motive, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Did you have any friends or mentors who helped you get started in the real estate business?
In the real estate business?
Yes.
Yeah. The first mentor that I had, frankly, and he passed away now, was Jamshedji Pauri in Vancouver. He was the great, great man for all of us. And secondly, my advisor, Professor Stan Hamilton at University of British Columbia. A story about that. He was teaching us mortgage the procedures and how we should proceed with that and everything. And then he gave us a photocopy or polycopy of about 40 pages. I took that one to my dormitory, and I saw that there are quite a number of mistakes in it. So very hesitantly, I was very scared of it, so I made those corrections. The next day went and gave it to him. I said, Professor, I'm sorry about that. I don't mean that you made a mistake, by the way. There are so many of these mistakes. And he looked at me and got it and said, okay, thank you very much. And then about a week after that, he said, okay, why don't you come here and go and see to the dean of University of British Columbia. Oh, I was afraid. I've done something really wrong here now. And he gave me the $500 check, and that was the biggest incentive that I could say. To put it in relative basis, is equivalent of you give me a check right now for $1 million. Believe me, that time, because the whole tuition for the entire year was $450 for a graduate. So that was one of my incentive that I started.
What was your first investment
First investment, while I was studying, and my wife and daughter, they came to Vancouver from Iran, and I was renting a place, was small. Then I saw an ad on the paper that there is a townhouse there with little down payment, and we could get a government second mortgage. So, and with combination of these two, I kind of, with about $3,000 down payment, I bought that townhouse. That was my first investment, frankly. And really, those days, the prices were much less in prices in Vancouver. Was maybe the average houses were about $30,000, $35,000. Right now, nothing is less than $1 million in comparison basis. And that was my first deal.
Did you do any analysis before you bought it, or you just bought it on blind faith?
To be honest with you, I wanted to own something. So that was my desire. So I started with that anyway.
Yeah.
And that's how it went.
So you just jumped in.
Exactly. And then how I got started with my real estate, when I finished my MBA at UBC, I started going to my PhD at Simon Fraser University, and then I was looking for a job during the summertime. And by accident, I met one of my classmates. I said, so what are you doing? He said, I'm in real estate. And he told me, I asked him, what do you do in real estate? He said, well, are you stupid? We are buying and selling some houses or whatever, real estate. And he said, okay. And I was looking for a job. Wherever I was going, they said that either you are overqualified, if I was honest, that what I've done and everything, or you don't have Canadian experiences. I said, gosh, so I really have a hard time of finding a job. So he told me that, yeah, there is some ad on the paper. If you are licensed real estate, which you are because of my MBA, you could go and start real estate. They pay you $1,000 a month, guaranteed. That is how I started real estate for 3 months. To be honest with you, I didn't do nothing. I was trying to learn and everything, I was cashing my check, $1,000. After that, the people from Iran was coming to US because that was in 1974, 1975. And then most of the Baha'is were coming there. And I was the first Iranian real estate person in British Columbia those days. And everybody was coming to me because of my Farsi, or knowing Persian. So that is how I started. I started to boom.
So did you acquire properties, buildings after that, like single-family homes or multi-family apartment buildings? And did you actually start building and development? Tell us how you went ahead after that.
Okay. As a salesman, I was just buying whatever that people wanted to buy. And most of the people in Iran, by the way, they like to buy land. And this is what we're doing. So we were really heavy, they buying the land, holding them, and then goes up. That kind of investment doesn't make sense that much here, because you have to feed it, by the way, if you borrow out of it, or the zoning might change. Everything else also might affect that environment, this and that. And so then I had one client that he wanted to buy properties in the United States. So I was driving around him in Seattle area, and make the story short, he didn't buy nothing from me. However, there was a piece of property, really good location. I said, location. So he said, really, this is good. This is growing area. The price is really good. The owner is desperate, wanted to sell. And then he's willing to carry the mortgage. You don't have to go and be qualified because you are not U.S. resident. He said, no, no. And then I made an offer myself, right there. And then subject to 3 months study, feasibility study. And we are talking about 1975 now, by the way. And then after less than a month, the realtor called me. He said, Al, they called me Al, are you really going to buy this piece? I said, to be honest with you, no. Why? You have something? I don't have such money to buy it. He said, I have a buyer for that. He pays you $50,000 more. Are you willing to sell? I said, yes, right away. And then he said, oh, there is one condition. You have to pay me $10,000, you pocket $40,000. I said, deal is done. So, okay, come next day to Seattle. So I went there, and that was my starting point of investment. $40,000 making profit after that. And then I got out of my real estate career, buying for the others, frankly. And during that time, believe it or not, I made over 1,000 transactions in Washington State and British Columbia area. And then formed an investment company. And then people were coming to buy, be partner. And so we were mostly involved with land, then diversified because the interest rate went high. And most of the purchases was owner-carried mortgage. We call it agreement for sale. And that is how we started. The economy was booming, frankly, as far as real estate market is concerned, and everything started on that one. And I was looking at different properties, as you mentioned. So land was our main buy, and then naturally houses. And then my first acquisition, which the major one, was 23 houses in there was a builder in Albuquerque. He came to Seattle area, in Olympia area, the capital of Washington State. He built 3 houses and got into bad economy. The bank was selling those one. And so we went there and bought those 23 houses. We paid about $32,000 per house or something like that. And then I didn't have too much money either for 23 houses. Or the same bank carried the mortgage, and I had a good Chinese friend. And finally, we agreed that he pays a little bit more down payment. I pay the rest of them, everything. And that was one of my best investments, too, by the way, because I made at least 3 times the income out of those houses, and still have about a few of them left. And the prices are $100,000 or more, about $120,000. That was one of my first investment, major one that I did.
Okay, so let me summarize. You were buying raw land or developed lots. What was it?
Well, developing a lot. I had one experience on that. We had 92 lot subdivision, and actually one of my partners is right here now, but anyway, I don't want to identify him. So we had problem with the title company. And so although they insured the title as far as buying the land, and then when we finished it, we wanted to sell it, then they had to get a new title insurance, and one was Trans-America title those days, and then after that, Chicago title. There's no, sorry, we cannot give you the insurance. Why not? And anyway, make the story short, we had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy on that one. And then we hired the attorney, and we won. And they paid us $500,000. And so subdivision,
Go ahead.
Yes. A little bit out of it,
sure,
is really, really risky business. There are many things that potentially might go wrong. Actually, right now, I have 11 lot subdivision, another 80 acres we have that we are doing subdivision. And there are long stories to tell you. If you want to do subdivision, it's better you really make sure that everything is right, because anybody might oppose you. And the neighbors and others and so many, and sometimes you see that in the middle of the road or middle of the lots that you have, something unexpected shows up and delay the things. So yes, I've done lots of subdivision work, and then also buying and holding it and selling it and building houses as well, Kavasji.
So the idea was to buy real estate that's in the path of progress, so that the population growing helps you and your properties go up in value automatically over the years as you hold them, with the benefits of inflation and growth.
That's absolutely right. You're right, Kavasji. Again, I cannot emphasize more. The most important thing is location, number one. Number two, always when you want to buy a piece of property, then you have to think that who is going to buy it from you and why they want to pay more to you, and whether you've done your due diligence or not. Buying stuff here in the US and Canada is real easy. Selling it is the most difficult one, especially if you have to sell. This is the worst timing, that you have to sell your property, and then you have to have a reason and the people why they want to buy yours now in relation to the other properties. And that is really significant that you have to keep in mind. And so the time is not enough for me to say that even if you want to buy a house, what due diligence you should do and everything. Because right now, because when I sold the property, I'm facing that problem now. All the inspection and everything that they do, and who is responsible for that, and how you should mitigate those.
So you have, when you buy the property, that's your plan A, but you have to consider the risk of failure. So you have a plan B, which is your fallback position. What happens if that investment is not panning out? When do you decide to cut the cord and let that property go?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is really whether you diversify. And then I get into that subject, please.
Sure.
When you diversify, you are in different areas. In my case, for example, I own the office buildings, the shopping centers, commercials, industrial, and then houses, land. And then also I invest in biodiesel companies. I'm the major shareholder on that one. And then we have drug addiction, medical treatment with native Indians. They are our partners, because for them it's easy to get their license, by the way. That's the reason that we're their partner. And we do the management on that one. And then made some investment in foreign countries like Kazakhstan and Cameroon and other places. I want to say that diversification always helps you. And so that is number one, which is really important to keep in mind. And the other aspect of it, in 2007 and 8, when real estate went down, we own lots of properties, by the way, mortgages, taxes you have to pay, this, that, everything. And then my diversification helped me. I had a condo like in British Columbia, in Vancouver, waterfront, beautiful condo, and US was really going down, but Vancouver market was going up. And then, the one that I paid $1,050,000, I bought it about 5 years back, so I had demand for it for $2.4 million. I immediately sold that one and took care of this downtrend market here in US. Diversification really helps of doing that. Then the question comes at Darius Irani mentioned, leveraging really. How much you want to leverage yourself? One of the worst thing is if you use your line of credits, I'm not talking about equity line of credit, which you get it from, let's say, increase in value of your houses and get equity line of credit. Your line of credit, for example, you have $100,000 line of credit. Every year you have to pay it back, and they want to see that activity is going on. That is the worst thing that you want to do. Don't invest that one into real estate. I had bad experience on that. And with equity line of credit, I can understand that. Yes, you do that one, it's a good business too. However, if those crunches happens, you have to sell the best properties that you have. This is the price that you have to pay. So in other words, market goes sour, nobody is going to buy you your distressed property, the one that you have 50% vacancy, for example, or you have this issue, that issue. They want to look at the best location that you have and the best cap rate or return that you show on that one. You have to sell that property. This is the price that Kavasji you have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Did you have any experience with nuisance tenants in your income properties?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Many of them. That's the reason that I've learned that most of my properties are managed by management company, by the way. And I've learned it in hard way. So they can deal with them, they have proper agreement. If they are late, let's say 5 days late, they give them notice right away, and then if you don't do this, we're going to do this and everything else. And if you have problematic tenant, really you have to deal with the attorneys and court and vacation, and you get ruined property, by the way. Any damage that they can do to your property, they do that. Yes, and very sad experience goes to you.
Right. We have a lot of aspiring young people here who are interested in getting started in real estate. And tell them about the risk of the 3 T's and how to deal with them in any income property that they buy. Does anybody know? Everybody know what the 3 T's are? The first T is tenants, the second T is termites, and the third T is toilets.
Thank you, Coach. I didn't even know it either. For the young people, frankly, if I could do it, when I came out of Iran, I had $1,200. That's all I had, ever had any money out of Iran. And then the first week that I got here, I got toothache and had to pay $500 of it for my dentist. So I left with $500 or $700. And if I could do it, I'm sure all of you can do it too. You see, first of all, really I believe, especially in the US, is land of opportunities. The prices is much less than Canada, for example. Much more opportunity, taxes are a little bit less. And so there are many, don't be afraid of doing your research and going after that. Ask the question, look at the advertising. And then you have to pick your own one. Nothing is there to tell you. If you see an opportunity there that you think, don't think that you cannot get it. So that is the only thing that I can say, really. I really don't know what else to say. I just want to say that, real estate is not liquid asset. Buying it easy, selling it is really difficult. Therefore, you cannot leverage too much of yourself. However, you can start with, as I started with my $2,500. I started my first townhouse and then went up and up and up. And so that could be started. If you want to, there is another way of being partnership, to partner with the other people. And, for Those things is whether you have really a good partnership agreement and buy and sell agreement, and anything might go wrong for one of the partners or others. And I've had many of those cases, by the way. And especially in limited liability company, if something happens, what percentage of the vote could you remove, let's say your general manager or the person that was in charge? These are all you have to be really careful and reading it carefully. And otherwise later on, for example, we had beautiful business of this native health service or the drug addiction treatment, 4 clinics in Washington State and Oklahoma. And then, for a while we were doing great because of the contract and everything. We got into one bad partner. And mostly was our own part because we didn't know that. For example, he filed twice bankruptcy in the past. We didn't know about that. And then he made the contract, LLC contract. He was showing us such a rosy picture, and then we were kind of blinded on that one. I'm blaming right now ourselves now. I was one of them, by the way. And then, so when you want to start, when you get into partnership, really you have to be careful on that one. Who is your partner? And my other advice is, frankly, you better not be partnered with your relatives. So, I'm not saying that they are bad, but, again, the thing changes, is the money part comes along, and differences, and usually after a while, then you don't have maybe not a good income or good properties, and not the best friend with your relative either. So that's another thing.
Tell me, Alayar, how did your heritage as a Zartushti play a role in your building your wealth? Was that a plus or was it a detriment?
Was absolutely a plus. When I started in 1974-75, one reason was the only real estate person in Vancouver area, and secondly was because of the Zartushtis. They were coming, they had the chance of going to the other people too. They were coming to me. That is number one. Number two, I was involved with movie theaters, by the way. I had a chain of a theater near you. That was my chain. And also in Canada, a theater near you, Canada. And had over 100 screens all over, everything. And then also, I was distributing Indian movies. The same day and date with India through Eros International Inc. I'm sure my Indian friends, they know Eros. And I was 50% partner, by the way, with them. What happened, I had a movie theater in Toronto, Albion Cinema, and was a big theater, 2 screens, one of them 700 and something seats, the other one 550 seats. And so we were showing second-run movies because we couldn't get first run. Second, I was doing relatively good. One day, one Indian guy came to me and said, "Do you want to lease or rent your theater to me?" I said, no. We have enough problem. What do you want to do with an Indian movie? I said, no. He said, "Why don't you give me for midnight show?" Then I thought about it. Midnight show, nobody is there anyway. And do you have anybody coming for midnight show? Yes, I do. So rented that theater to that guy. And then I saw that Friday night and Saturday night was totally sold out shows. And he was paying us, let's say, $1,000 a week on that one. And then the money that we made out of concession area was more than I was making in 1 week in my English theater one or Hollywood one. The next time they say that, can you give us 9 o'clock? Yes, I give you 9 o'clock too. And then one of the movies that we were showing there was Hum Aapke Hai Khan. Hum Aapke Hai Khan with Shah Rukh Khan and Madhuri Dixit and many other ones. And the Eros International one, the head guy, Kishore Lula, he didn't know me or nothing. He called me and said, by the way, how you are doing with this movie? Frankly, we are sold out, every show. He said, you're sold out? Yes. And then he said that, can you tell me, for example, last week, how much you did? I told him, well, we had, 2 shows or whatever, this number of people, how much dollar we've done that. He said, okay. And then he called me and said, Al, I wanted you to come to London. And I send you the ticket. And here is the Heritage Conference.
Right.
And then I went there and he said, I want to give you the movies. You distribute it to me. And then tell me, who are you? What is your ethnic or, I said, well, I'm Zartushti. And they didn't know. He knew Zartushti, but anyway. And I said, well, I'm Parsi. Well, wasn't really from India, but anyway. he knew what I meant. And he immediately shook my hand and said, Al, you are my partner from now. I don't want to know nothing about it because you are Parsi. And then I had the best business with him, by the way. We were distributing at least 60 to 70 movies all over US and Canada. And Eros International, then we formed Eros Entertainment, Inc. And we were also distributing the movies. All of these stars were coming to the office was in New Jersey. And New York also, all of this theater, and I have all kind of pictures with Shah Rukh Khan and Aishwarya Rai and everyone, Sunny Deol, and you name them, all of them. And then he finally bought me out on that one. So if it wasn't because of being Zartushti, and he didn't know me, only knew that I'm Zartushti was enough for me. So that is, yes, that's a big plus, absolutely.
Right, yeah. When I grew up in Karachi, I had some Muslim friends, and they would ask me what I was, and I would say I'm a Parsi. So, oh, everybody wants to own Parsi-owned cars. And if you, and even the non-Parsi would advertise Parsi-owned cars in the newspapers. So, Alayar, how would you advise our up-and-coming youth? How should they be thinking going forward? Do you have any words of wisdom before we close?
Well, I'm repeating myself here. Really, you have to look for opportunities, and you have to start from small. And that 3 months that I was working in the real estate company, I was doing nothing, by the way. That was the best investment that I did because I was learning, frankly, on that one. And then the only thing that I can say, it is a matter of trial and error, frankly. There is no formula on that one, or at least I don't know about it. So I believe what is your intuition, what tells you that what you should do, maybe that's the best way of doing it. And there are some failure, I have to tell you that. 2 or 3 times, almost I was in the bankruptcy situation. And then again, you never give up. You try, and you see that you will succeed. And the other thing that I believe is this principle of karma. I believe, whatever that you give, it is back. And I really believe this social responsibility. As Fariborz Masih said yesterday, and many other people were talking about it, I really believe in that kind of helping the group, the society, whomever that, come to your path, and helping you get it more reward and more rewarding. I've seen that, frankly, myself. I haven't done too much. I don't want to be selfish. I'm just saying that being a Zartushti, you really think that way, then the people trust you more and they come to you and they want to give you the money for investment. And that is maybe one way that could be started, using, the only thing is, as far as banking is concerned, I'm repeating it, don't leverage it too much. Usually not more than 65, 70%. I would say that you don't want to borrow beyond that, because you never know the market. It's not always going up and up and up. No, it's going down, down too. And I've seen 2 or 3 of those, by the way. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Alayar. We will entertain 3 questions from the audience because we are short on time. So anybody with a question, please raise your hand and keep it to a question and not an observation. Anybody with a question for Alayar? Please, stand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So when you started your career, you've gone through your whole career now, and is there one thing you changed going back, looking back?
One thing that I changed is I had at least 50 partnerships with the other groups, and I don't do that many anymore, number one. Number two, I'm making sure that I have a proper agreement, not matter of trust. Trust is there, but we want to make sure that everything is also on the paper, writing. So if I have to start again, I do that one. That way, have a proper agreement. And the third thing is, I don't invest only in one area. For example, only houses. And I try to diversify in different areas. Initially, we were doing only lands, and that was, I confess, our mistakes. Because I was buying for the others, and they were interested to buy houses. They were beautiful apartment, everything else. They said, no, we want to buy a house, we don't want to have a headache, everything. And then I guess partly I blame myself too, perhaps I didn't guide them properly, and I didn't know more than that anyway. And then that is the changes that I make.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question, Mr. Mehta?
Whatever you said, my name is John Mehta. I'm from Houston, originally from Karachi. You impressed us with how you started and how you made your fortune, diversification, so many partnerships. One question, are you able to sleep well? And that actually was a question that my wife asked.
I can answer that. He can not only sleep well, but he can eat well very well.
I'm glad that you are from Houston, because I have some experience in Houston too, by the way. I had 3 movie theaters there. I was going back and forth a lot and everything. Believe me, then becomes a matter of your habit, your really job, and then sometimes you have some problem, but yes, I do sleep well. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Alayar. You gave a wonderful insight on how you got started, how you built your wealth with integrity and living Zatushti principles. So we thank you very much. We're full of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will now introduce Dr. Arda-e-viraf, Minocherhomjee from Mumbai. He's basically a scientist, a PhD in pharmacology, and he also holds a degree of Masters of Business Administration from the University of Washington, British Columbia. And he has done postdoctorate fellowship in the medical science field and industry. He became a financial analyst with William Blair and Company, and he progressed as a managing director, and now he has his own company, founding and managing partner of Chicago Capital Partners, and his field is private equity. Arda,
Before you start, can I say something?
sure.
So Al and I have known each other for 35 years. I'm not sure if most of you know that. So first I went to Vancouver to study, and that's when I met Al. And then on October 1st, 1984, I got an NIH scholarship to come to University of Washington Medical School to do my postdoctoral fellowship. So I used to be pretty young and wild in those days. Maybe nothing much has changed. So I come in my Ford Pinto, yellow Pinto, and that's all I could own at that time, a Ford. So I come to straight away. I got up at 4 o'clock in Vancouver. I took my car, came to University of Washington, did a day's work, and in the afternoon, my wife tells me, where are you going to stay? So I said, I have no clue. So I was going to stay in some cheap motel. So my wife tells me, oh, call Alayar. He's in real estate. He should know something in Seattle. So I said, okay, I call Al. I say, hey, Al, you recommend some place to stay? He says, no, don't worry. You just come to Kirkland. I'll pick you up. I don't know if he remembers all this. So I said, okay. Then he comes and picks me up and treats me to dinner. And then he says, how much do you want to spend? So I said, Al, maybe like $400. Those days my NIH scholarship was $20,000. So I said, $400. He says, yeah, come over, no problem. And I spent the night at his place for free, of course. And then next day he says, whatever you can afford, you pay me. You can just stay at my place. So thank you, Al. That really helped me out. Okay, now you can start.
What a small world, huh?
It is.
So tell us about how much competition you had in your field in being a financial analyst. And were there any times when you were in an adversarial situation, and how you dealt with it?
So becoming a financial analyst, as you can imagine, is intensely competitive. There are only no more than 20 positions on Wall Street, so you're competing for one of the 20 positions. So it's very competitive. But you know what? I like competition. I'm a very competitive person. The one thing I learned early on in my life is I take my business very seriously, but not myself. So I have a lot of fun. But in business, I'm intensely competitive. And so when I first started my career, obviously you don't know much when you start your career. So because I had a science background, I had to transition into business. And that's not easy, but one thing I learned from my mother is anyone can become smart by asking questions. So I was very inquisitive, and what I did is I always associated myself with smart people. So one of my clients was Peter Lynch. So he would ask very tough questions. So one thing I learned is to just write down the questions he was asking. So my brokers used to say, what the hell is this kid writing down, okay? And you won't believe it, smart people ask different questions. Dumb people ask the same 10 questions. So you go to 10 portfolio managers, 9 of them will ask the same stupid questions to you. The one guy will ask, and that's why he became a billionaire. So I said, I may never become a billionaire, but at least I can become a millionaire if I follow what he's thinking, his thought processes. So all you have to do is to differentiate yourself. And once you differentiate yourself, then portfolio managers will figure out over time how you build your track record and how they can trust you.
So how did you progress to private equity from being a financial analyst?
So one thing I have always done is I never get settled in my comfort zone, so to speak. So if you can imagine starting my career in science, and I had 18 publications, so I knew the next 18 publications would become a lot easier, but I became a financial analyst because I never told you how I got into that field, because a headhunter found me and made me the offer. And at that time, I would have had a job at Merck for $65,000, which is more money than most PhDs would make, because I had an MBA. And then the headhunter told me it's 150,000. I said to myself, that's a little more than 65. and you have to take risk, okay? Because if you don't take risks, then you can't progress in life, okay? So you have to get out of your comfort zone and take risks. So when I was a financial analyst, I made good money because I was the head of healthcare research at William Blair, which is a partnership. But I knew one thing, that when I was an analyst, I was always looking for two things, okay? Which are more profitable businesses and which are scalable business models. That's the two things you always look for if you want to make a lot of money. And private equity was definitely one of those businesses. So I had made up my mind in the last 3 years being a financial analyst that I would transition into that business. So then I got an opportunity when I was a financial analyst to work at William Blair to start working in private equity because I was a partner there. So we had invested in 3 businesses, and luckily all 3 of them did well. So that was my entree into private equity.
Tell us about your best investment you made.
So just to make sure everyone realizes does everyone know what private equity is? Okay. No? Yes?
Please explain.
So a financial analyst is a somewhat different job than getting into private equity. So financial analyst, sorry, I'll just go back one step,
sure,
okay,
sure.
so that you know what I've done. So when you're a financial analyst, you are doing research on companies, and then you take that research, and then you write a research report, and you sell your ideas to portfolio managers. Because let's say the Fidelity portfolio manager is managing 100 billion. So he has no time to do all the research on companies. So he relies on people like me to make the recommendations to buy those companies. So I was selling something, and every time they bought something, I made money. And if you make mistakes and make them lose money, next time they won't buy from you. Very easy, okay? In a capitalist society, it's very easy. And that business is, as I said, intensely competitive. At the end of every day, everybody in your firm knows how much money you made for the firm. It's not like on a quarterly basis. So every day you get a report card. So I did that for 14 years, okay? Then I was getting older. I said there must be an easier way to make money. So in private equity, what we do is we invest money in private companies. That's what's called private equity, okay? And we buy equity ownership. But where does all this money come from? So first thing and the most important thing is we need to raise funds. So in total, my partners, 2 partners and I have raised 1.2 billion in assets. So who are the investors in our funds? So our investors are all institutional investors, the biggest ones being pension funds, and we also have university endowments. So State Fund of Minnesota is our largest investor. They gave us 75 million. Then we have Credit Suisse, insurance companies, and others who have each given us 50 to 100 million. So we take that money and invest in private companies. So first is to find a good private company. And that is the reason why I don't know if people know, I travel a lot. So it's like dating. You have to date 10 girls to find out which one you really want to be with. So you just can't find that girl, okay? It's very difficult. And they all look pretty the first time you go out. Sorry for drawing that analogy. Girls can say the same thing about us. But having said that, it's really true, because what is happening is when you go, you can do all your market research and analysis, but until you figure out how good that person is, how good the CEO is, and if you really want to be with that person, because once I make an investment, I'm going to be with that person for at least 4 to 6 years. And during that lifetime, you have to really love the person. He or she has to like you and be able to work together. So it is difficult, but not impossible.
Tell us about any business mistakes you made and how you learned from them and how you resolved not to repeat them.
Any. My God, I'm 61. I've made many mistakes, not any mistakes. So the biggest mistake, and I'll tell you about the good ones I had too. So the biggest mistake you make when you're younger is to not focus on the CEO. That's what I was trying to get earlier. So if you look at how you go about making the investment process. So usually I start with the market. So you look at the market, the characteristics of the market size, the growth rate, the dynamics, and then figure out how competitive that position of the product is, okay, or how differentiated the product is. But none of it matters if you have a stupid CEO, believe me. Now, when I say a stupid CEO, they're not stupid in terms of intellect, okay? All of them are at Harvard MBA, Stanford MBA, whatever. So they are not stupid in terms of intellect. So what they lacked is this, what we call emotional quotient, EQ, not IQ. They can't just work with others. They can't work with the board members. So I'm usually the chairman of the board in all the companies in which I invest. And I have a lot more experience, okay, because I've done it so many times. I know when something is going wrong, what's going wrong, and how to quickly fix it. But if they don't listen to you, then there is nothing you can do except to fire them. And that process takes a long time. So when I was earlier in my career, I used to make a mistake saying, hey, the CEO will somehow learn and work with me. It doesn't work that way. Conversely, the great investments I've had, so that's the one thing I would never do again. In the first 15 minutes usually now, I can tell if I want to work with that person or not. And even my secretary can tell if I'm going to work with that person because I lose interest. After 15 minutes, I know I'm not going to do business, and I'm stuck with that person for the next 45 minutes because I gave them an hour to make the pitch. And there are certain characteristics in a human which you figure out, being a Parsi, you have a big nose. So you can usually tell that this thing is just not going to work out. Why waste time? So you move on. And if your instincts are telling you, don't do it. But the place, conversely, where I have made great money is figuring out the right market to be in. So figuring out the right market to be in is the most important thing. Because if you're in the wrong market that's not growing, then your CEO is constantly fighting a battle every day. No matter how smart he or she is, it's a constant battle, okay? So the place where I made my money, for example, would be the first investment which was successful, this is a long time ago, was a company called Morton Grove Pharmaceuticals. So when I was an analyst, I knew that $20 billion of brand name products were going to become generic in the next 5 years. So I used my common sense and said, hey, 20 billion, so this is simple math, okay? Because those drugs are priced 50% less. Actually, the value of the market is 10 billion now, get it? So then you have to ask yourself, if I can find a company where I can get only 5% share, how much money can I make? So those companies are less profitable, but I know I can make at least $20, $30 million in profit. If I sell it at 10 times, that's 300 million, right? So if I can buy a company between 20 and 30 million, I have a chance to make 10 times my money. So in that investment, I made 12 times my money. Then there is another company here in two actually companies in San Diego. One is in the area of spine. So for those who know something about spine, most people eventually will have a problem with spine, especially if they're obese. So as you know, obesity is increasing, so you have to get the trends, okay? So obesity increasing means you know that the market for spinal products will increase. Now, in order to do a spinal surgery, before you have to either go from the back or from the front, posterior, anterior. And those are very bad ways to treat a spine. So this company found a way to treat the spine laterally, and because they had a good product. So that company, when we invested, had 6 million in revenue, and today they have 800 million in revenue. So sometimes you get lucky, but sometimes you have to use your own common sense. And then there was another company, in this case, the female CEO, she was extremely smart. She provided a service to hemoncs, which are hematologists, oncologists. So when hemoncs were treating patients, they used to get reports from 5 different places, from a hematologist, cytologist, whoever, okay? And then they had to figure out what to do with all those reports and what the right treatment for the patient would be. So what she figured out was to do all these tests under one roof, and then she would print out a report on one page. Our sales went from 3 million when I invested to 100 million in 3 years. I sold my company in 2 years and made 10 times. So it's like all over.
Did you have any unique experience as a Zarathustra, and did you play that hand?
I don't think it's like playing a hand. So what you do is, I think when people say being a good Zarathustra, what you're doing for yourself, I think, is you're helping your own career and yourself. Because think about it, okay, in US, they talk about honesty and integrity. So obviously, every Zarathustra should have that. And when you have that, I think what most people don't realize is you're making your life easier, not the other guy's life. Because what happened to me was, I can tell you honestly that over all these years, my repeat business is one of the highest in the industry. So people want to deal with me because they know what they're going to get out of me, that I'll never screw anybody. So they can work with me. I've been called a tough SOB. I don't really care. But at the end of the day, they know that I will never cheat anybody. So they keep on coming to me. Now, if you think about it, getting new business is the most difficult thing to do in business. So let's talk about this state fund of Minnesota. People have no clue. Do you think somebody just writes me a check of $75 million? It's not because of my looks, believe me, okay? So it has to be something else. So what is it? It's because they believe I can make them money and I'm honest, okay? And I'll treat them properly. If you have no clue how much time that takes, it's like it takes over a year to get that client, okay? They grill you inside out, do things. Now, if I ever lose that client, I'm dead. To get $75 million from somebody else, I'll have to take another 100 trips. You follow what I'm going to get it somehow or the other. So this saves me 100 trips. So think about that. So that honesty and integrity, being a good Zartusti, just pays off to yourself. It's like investing in yourself. When people screw someone, they never make money because of that.
So a wise old man who had very good judgment was asked, how do you arrive at good judgment? And his answer was experience. And then the question he was asked is, how do you get experience? He said, bad judgment. So, Arda, do you have any words of wisdom to inspire our youth and how they should be thinking?
I don't know if I'm a wise man, but I can tell you what worked for me. Just as what Al said, is I think I believed in myself. That's the most important thing. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. Why should Minnesota invest in me if I don't believe in my own self, okay? So the most important thing is to have self-confidence and believe in yourself. So I never listen to other people, especially if they are dumber than I am. So associate yourself with very smart people. Dumb people say dumb things, so you have to have the intellect to quickly dissect what is true, what is not true. So there was I can't remember the saying, but if you want to soar like an eagle, don't go around with turkeys. Right. So that's the thing you have to follow when you're a younger person. Associate yourself with smart people and follow your dream. And I also remember the words of wisdom I got from my dad and my mom. So my dad always told me there are 3 A's you have to follow in life. And I don't even know if my son remembers them. I've told him 1,000,000 times. So the 3 A's are adopt, adapt, and adept. So the last one is very important. In whatever you do, you have to be adept at it. You cannot be second class in anything you want to do and be successful in your career. And the most important thing is you should always get an A for attitude. If you get a B grade in something, people will overlook it and will forgive you. If you screw up on your attitude, that's a black mark. So that's all I would say.
Thank you, Arda. Arda will now entertain. Arda will entertain 3 questions. The lady in the front.
My name is Minocherhomjee, and the question I have, thank you. The question I have is when you buy these small businesses, do you make sure you own 51%?
No. So I have invested like over 5 funds. So the answer really varies. Initially, I used to be a venture capital investor. In those cases, I was not a 51% investor. I used to own 15% to 25% of a company. And it really doesn't make much of a difference whether you own 51% of that or not. In fact, I did not want to own 51% because I wanted to be more diversified because the chances of failure. So you have to really understand the business model, what you're trying to do, okay? It's all about strategy, right? And then you figure out how to do things. So in that case, I wanted to be more diversified. And so I would take smaller amounts of money and put in 5 because I needed only 3 to make money. You follow? It didn't matter what my ownership was. What the hell would I do if a product is not working?
Well, my concern in that would be that you don't have any control.
So that's...
They take your money and then they don't work at it and build
okay.
business. You lose.
Yeah. So I follow. So, but the kinds of businesses I invest in are with other institutional investors. So it's not like I'm not buying some small business from someone and running it. So my other investors on the board would be Kleiner Perkins or whoever, okay? So we are all institutional investors. We all know exactly what we want to do, and we could fire the CEO overnight. But more importantly, I didn't get into this, okay? When you are in my business, you have to really know how to structure your documents, okay? So to Al's point, in my business also, there's a lot of legal stuff that goes into it. Every year I spend at least $500,000 on legal expenses. So whenever we do a business, so without getting into detail, so let's say I get into Series C investment, okay? So two other investors have come in A and B rounds. I am in investor C. So I structure my security in a way that I have a lot of protection. So I have veto rights, I have drag-along rights, I have all these things that I built into my term sheet that will protect me at the end. So, but having said that, now in the last two funds, I have only done buyouts where I'm the majority owner. I own almost all of it, so I control the whole company.
Like Warren Buffett, you buy majority of the company, but then you're saying with two other investors, the three of you all own the majority interest of the invest.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very nice.
The lady on our right.
Thank you.
I'm Dolly, and you were earlier talking about the right market and the wrong market, and that's how you go about doing your investments and all. Exactly what are you talking about when you talk of right market and wrong market? Is it related to the stocks and all?
No.
Like that,
No, not the stock.
Explanation, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was referring to the market for the products or the services. So private equity, there is no stock market for private equity. So when I talk about market, again, it's the market for the products or services. I gave you the example of the spine market. So I know that the spine market is $10 billion in size. And I know if I get 10% market share because I have a new differentiated product, then if my company went to $1 billion in revenue, then I know, anyways, without getting into all the details, I know such a product can have 80% gross profit margin, 25% operating margin. I know what my net income can be. And then to Al's earlier, at the end of the day, I need to get my money back because I don't want to be married to somebody for 10 years, okay? In this business, because I cannot raise the next fund. So then I have to make sure that I also have an exit strategy. So some businesses are easily sellable, so to speak, okay? So I can do an IPO or another bigger medical products company or a pharmaceutical company might buy my product. So all these characteristics define what a market is and where I want to be.
Do you also do the foreign markets or only in America?
Only in America. It's just, I have, my one investment is in Montreal, but I don't consider that foreign, so. We own Canada, so it's okay. Just kidding.
Last question from Mr. Mehta.
Recently, I read a book by Nina Godiwala. You must have also read it, Suits.
I have not.
And it's an actual fiction, so I don't know how far it is so, but on reading it, I was amazed. I didn't know the work that a financial analyst had to do. The hours that are spent, the few hours that you get to rest, the principals that you have to work with who are very, very dominating and want you to complete a certain project within hours, not just days, hours. You went through that. It is not only tiring, I presume, but also trying. Was there a time that you felt that you had to throw in the towel?
First of all, the analysts that she was talking about are analysts in corporate finance. So I didn't do that. My job was in research. So I was more the chief than the Indian. Because by this time I already had 3 masters and a PhD, so I started my career a little higher up, so I didn't have to go through that. So I always had somebody else working for me, so they were stuck with me and doing all that stuff. But having said that, even doesn't matter if you're a chief or an Indian in that business, so to speak, everyone has to put in 15-hour days, 6 days a week. If you are not ready for that, you should not be in that business. It's extremely competitive, extremely hard. I had to go to each territory in the United States once a quarter. Europe twice a year. Japan once a year. Australia twice a year. So you're constantly on the move, you're working, you're selling, you're doing something. And that is why I said earlier, don't take yourself seriously. Otherwise, you can't execute. You follow what I mean? Because if you're working 15-hour days or whatever, you have to have fun. You're taking a client out, going out for a drink, you're trying to do some business with that person, but don't take yourself so seriously. Make sure you sell and you come home and you've had some fun.
Thank you.
I would like to present Alayar Dabestani with a small token of our appreciation. We had a wonderful talk, wonderful words of wisdom. We highly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And a token to our dear friend, Dr. Viraf, Arda-e-viraf Minocherhomjee. Thank you so much. We'll come to part B of our session. And before I introduce Tehemtan, I'd like to tell you about a gentleman who died, and he had 3 sons. And when he died, they opened up his will. And in the will it said, when I die, and when you come to the funeral and you come to my coffin, I want each of my sons to put $100,000 into my coffin. So the first son dutifully came in and put $100,000 in his coffin. And the second son also came in dutifully and had $100,000 and put it in the coffin. And the third son, he was a CPA, and he took out his wallet and he took out a piece of paper. And he said, I'm going to deposit $300,000 into the casket. And he pulled $200,000 out and put it in his pocket. So you see, dear friends, CPAs are wonderful problem solvers. And Tehemtan is the finest example of problem solving any tax questions you have. And today we know that IRS is becoming very tough after 9/11 in people having foreign accounts if you have more than $10,000. So Tehemtan will now take the podium and he will do a PowerPoint on his expertise and how to make sure you don't get into trouble.
Thank you. Kavasji also gave me another advice. And as a moderator, if I don't follow his advice, he might just throw me out. So he said, do tell our audience, remind them that Zarathustrians are very smart people. And he didn't just leave it at that. He gave me an example of what to say. And this is the example. There is a store in Mumbai being set up by 2 non-Zoroastrians. And they were just getting it ready. They were putting the shelves around, and they were a little tired. One of the non-Zoroastrians says to the other non-Zoroastrian, you know, this area is full of Zoroastrians. And these people are very smart, so be prepared for whatever comments they might make. And true enough, in a few minutes, a Zoroastrian fellow comes. And he says, Arre Baba, what are you selling here? So the non-Zoroastrian thought he was being very sarcastic. And he said, I'm selling donkeys. He says, business must be very good. You're only 2 left. Now, what I'm going to do, first of all, this word, potpourri, I've never written that word before, never spoken before. So I asked my daughter, Binayfer, is Binayfer here? How to pronounce it? So, potpourri. So she said potpourri, okay. And what I'm going to cover are some of the questions I get from people from India, Iran, Pakistan, the typical questions. And remember, one of the typical questions is people have had properties in their native lands. And the time has come to sell them, because most of the people here are not going to go back. And to hold on to their properties does not make much sense. So Is this the right click? Or do I just press this?
This is the button here. Is it the arrow?
Oh, this one.
There
Okay.
you go.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay. So this is an illustration of a flat the fellow has purchased in, say, 1967, and he has sold in 2014. When he purchased in 1967, it cost him 6 lakhs of rupees, or 600,000 rupees. And of course, because of inflation and price of real estate going up, in 2014, he sells it for 9 million rupees. So he says to himself, I've made a profit of 8,400,000 rupees. And he knows that as American taxpayers, whether you are a US citizen or a green card holder, you pay tax on your worldwide income, whether it's in America, Canada, India, Australia, doesn't matter. And so he says, okay, the rate of exchange now in 2014 is about 60 rupees to a dollar. Therefore, my gain in US dollars is $140,000, and I have to pay tax on that. And you said, no, wait a minute, that's not how you do it. This looks intuitive, but that's not the right way to do it. What you find out is, when you purchase the property in 1967, what was the rate of exchange between the rupee and the dollar? And at that time, it was 8 rupees to a dollar. So really, the house cost you $75,000 in those days. And now, when you sell it, it's $150,000. Therefore, your gain is only $75,000. That is what you report on the tax return. Okay, I assume this is a pretty simple example. Now let's take a similar situation of a flat purchased in 67 by your parents, and the last of your parents dies in 2010. At that time, the price has gone up from 600,000 to 8,000,001, and by the time you sell it in 3 years, it has become 9 million. So again, it looks like your gain is the difference between 9 million and 600,000. But again, the answer is no. That is not the right answer. Now here is another important tax principle, that whenever you inherit a property from somebody, your cost is not the cost the person from who you inherited, but the value of the property at the date of that person's death. So in 2010, the property was worth 8,000,001. At that time, the exchange rate was 45 rupees to a dollar. So really, your cost becomes $180,000. And now you sell it for more rupees, but really less dollars. So now you have incurred a loss of $30,000. Now the question is, can you take that loss on your US tax return? And you may say no, because there is one principle which says that you can never take a loss on personal property. Let's assume you buy a house in Los Angeles for $500,000. And after 2 years, market is bad, you sell it for $450,000. So you incurred a loss of $50,000. Can you deduct that loss? And the answer is no, because it's a personal loss. It's not a business loss. However, certainly in this case, you had no intention when your parents died of holding their property for personal purposes. You are holding it for investment. You are waiting for the right time to sell. Therefore, it becomes investment property. Therefore, the loss is a capital loss, and you should be able to deduct that on your tax return, subject to its own rules on how much capital loss you can deduct in a year. There are certain other rules which we did not go through. So these are some of the things which you should consider when you have that kind of a situation. Let's go to the next slide. Now, the next one is what Kavasji mentioned, which is a very, okay. In the last few years, you must have read in the papers a lot about foreign bank accounts. Not that that rule is a new one. That rule has been there for many years. But the government didn't seem to care too much whether you filed your reporting for monies held abroad. Now, what is that reporting? That reporting says that if you hold at any time during a year more than $10,000 in one or more bank accounts abroad, or financial accounts also, which would mean like accounts with Merrill Lynch type people in India or Pakistan or wherever, if that exceeds $10,000, you have to file a report, not with your income tax return, but with a separate form to be filed by June 30 of the next year, and there's no extension for filing that form. Okay. The penalty for that, if the IRS wants to impose it, is a minimum of $10,000 for not filing per year. If they think that you willfully didn't file it, the penalty becomes astronomical. Now, you must have read in the papers that UBS got into trouble a few years ago, and they encouraged some of their clients in the United States to open accounts in Switzerland without reporting them for income tax purposes in the United States. And the US government's arm is very long, remember that. And I must tell you one thing, we Indians coming from India, Iran, Pakistan, right, we have a tendency, nobody will find out, you know. Nobody will find out. But the government's arm is pretty long. And it's possible for them, one of these days, to find out what has happened. So anyway, they have had, I think, 3,000 people identified who had accounts with UBS, and they'll go after them like crazy. Okay. What does that do for people, say, among this audience who might have had this situation? Depending upon your level of tolerance, right, you might lose a little sleep at night if you have not reported it. Do you report it now? If you report it now, the question is, wouldn't the government perhaps say, why didn't you report it in earlier years? Questions like that arise. Okay. Now, I'm not going to give you the solution, because the solution, the real solution is, right, that you go to an attorney, because accountants don't handle these things directly with the client. The reason being that in case the IRS says it's a criminal offense that you didn't impose, accountants are not qualified to handle criminal matters. So attorneys are the ones who would take the case and then give all the work to us to do the reporting. Okay. Now, if you remember, when you file your income tax return, Schedule B, which shows interest and dividends, right? Right at the end of that form, there are some questions. Do you have a foreign bank account? Does the foreign bank account have more than $10,000? In which country do you have it? Not marking that itself is a problem, right? Because you are signing your tax return under penalties of perjury. So that's a big issue. And that could perhaps lead the IRS to say that you willfully did not file that form correctly. Now, if you have reported the income from your foreign bank accounts, but just didn't file this particular form, which, by the way, is now called FinCEN Form 114, if you just didn't file the form, that's not a big offense. They say, file it now, for the last 3 years at least. But if you have not reported the income also, then you are in a crazy situation. Now, remember that in future, you won't be able to hide these things because of something which is coming up. And I will mention not in the next slide, but in a subsequent slide. So what the government did in 2009 after UBS issue came up was they said, okay, if you want to make a voluntary disclosure, right, we'll accept your voluntary disclosure. What does that mean? It means you have to file your last 8 years' tax returns, report all your income, and pay a penalty which kept on increasing as they changed some of their rules to 27.5% of the highest balance. So imagine if you had $1 million at any time during those 8 years, immediately you pay the $275,000 penalty, plus, of course, the tax on the income you didn't report and other penalties. So it was a pretty harsh way for the government. And so recently now, they have started changing their policy. And they say that if it's not willful, and this is a legal question, when is an offense not willful, right? Maybe in your heart of hearts, you knew that issue, and you didn't report it. Is that willful now, by you saying that now I'm going to report it? So that's again a legal question, whether it's willful or not. But anyway, if you fall within that, the penalty, fortunately, is only 5% of the highest balance. And you only have to file 3 years' returns. Now, some people have tried to solve that issue by what they call a silent disclosure, meaning I'll file my returns from now on and file correctly. I won't worry about the past. And that could work, it may not work. Remember, millions of returns are going to the IRS every year. It may work, though there is indication that the IRS would identify some of those and say, why did you not file before? And so silent disclosure may or may not work, because it also shows that now you know the rule, but you didn't want to correct your past mistakes. Now, FATCA, and in Gujarati we say fatka, right? That is coming up now. And what that does is, the US government has told the foreign countries that unless you start reporting to us what the Americans hold in your accounts, right, we will impose certain sanctions on those countries' banking operations, etc. here. So most of the countries are, of course, responding positively and saying, yes, we will report to you. So very soon, it has already come for some countries, and it's coming for other countries. Other countries are going to start in 2015 to start reporting. So it won't be long before this comes out. Now, one of the solutions some people are thinking they can solve, let's say I had an account in India, $20,000. I never reported it. And I said, maybe I'll transfer it to my brother there, right? That way, at least, I won't have an account anymore, and maybe the government will never find it as far as the past years are concerned. Obviously, as a professional, I cannot give you that advice, but that's what some people are doing. Okay. There are some issues there. If it's your money and you give it to your brother, what is it? It's a gift, right? If you really give it. Did you file a gift tax return? So when you get in trouble, chances are you get in more and more trouble if you try to solve it without proper consultation with attorneys and accountants. Okay. I think I'm going to move, yeah, okay, there's something else which has come up in the foreign area. And that's Form 8938. And that comes up with your income tax return. It has only come up in the last 3 years. And basically it says that apart from your bank accounts and other financial accounts which you have to report in that other form, even if you had, let's say, individual stocks, because individual stocks did not have to be reported on that other form which I mentioned earlier, the June 30 form. Individual stocks did not have to be reported, the foreign individual stocks. But now, the foreign individual stocks, maybe your families have partnerships and you were one of the partners and you never perhaps reported that, right? You have to show your interest in that foreign partnership. And any loans from Indians or Iranians which you have given the money to, all that has to be reported. Now, you don't have to report if the amount is less than $100,000 at the end of the year. But you still have to report, even if you reduced it below 100, if you had 150,000 during the course of the year. Remember, on partnerships, if you had an interest in a foreign partnership, the rule on partnerships is that you have to report your share of the partnership's income on the US return, whether the partnership is a US partnership or a foreign partnership. So there is always that. Chances are many of us may not have done that if they have small family partnerships in India, Pakistan, Iran, whatever. Again, there are penalties for not reporting those. The other issue comes up when somebody dies abroad and you are the recipient of the inheritance in cash. When I say cash, I mean by bank transfer. So the first thing you have to remember is inheritance is never taxable to you as a recipient, right? You don't ever pay tax on an inheritance. However, if the inheritance is more than $100,000, you do have to report it on that Form 3520. Okay. Again, not reporting, everything has at least a $10,000 penalty. So all these foreign forms are pretty expensive not to consider them. Then if you, I'm just giving you an example of a couple of other forms. If you hold an interest in a foreign corporation, an Indian corporation, okay, there's a Form 5471. If you have an interest in a foreign partnership, 8865, and then there are other foreign forms. So the foreign area is replete with issues, complexities, etc. I think we will now probably move into the domestic area, except for one more thing. Okay. Now let's assume you are a foreigner from, say, Hong Kong. I think there are a couple of people from Hong Kong who are registered here. And they may say, let me buy some US stock because they are good stocks to hold. Okay. The point is that when that person dies, even if the value of the stock exceeds $60,000, that person's beneficiaries are subject to estate tax, which is not the case with US persons. Remember, in US, if you die, most of us will not pay estate tax. Why? Because the exemption is like almost $5.5 million per person. If I'm married, it becomes twice roughly. So it's $11 million. Most of us don't have $11 million, right? So that's not an issue. But a foreigner, unless there's a tax treaty, like Canadians don't have this problem. But people from India, there's no estate tax treaty with United States. People from Hong Kong, if they own US corporate stocks, they would pay estate tax. So the idea is to hold it through an intermediate foreign company. So if you want to hold a US stock, the Hong Kong person should hold stock in a Hong Kong corporation or another foreign corporation, which would own stock in the US company, and then that's okay. Moving on to the US side now. Zoroastrians are supposed to be very charitable, right? And the American tax law really gives you a tremendous advantage in allowing you to do that. And I'm giving you here an illustration of that. Let's assume you purchased a stock for $5,000 and it's now worth $25,000. So if you sell it, it's a US stock, you have a gain of $20,000. Correct? What is the tax on that? I'm assuming it's a 40% rate because you have to consider the federal tax, the state tax, and recently they have introduced the 3.8% net investment income tax, which applies also to capital gains. So all that I assume to be 40%. So you'd pay a tax of $8,000. Therefore, you'd be left with what? 17, right? You sold it for 25. Tax is 8, and what remains is 17. Now let's assume that you decide to give it to your Zartusti association, assuming it's tax-exempt association, and you are in an overall 50% federal and state bracket. You'll now get back from the government. You won't get back anything from the stock market because you didn't sell it, but you'll get back from the government $12,500. So what has happened? You just suffered a $4,500 reduction in your wealth, right, in your cash. But your organization got $25,000. Look at the gap. Wouldn't you like to give $25,000 to your organization if it costs you only $4,500? And I think most of us would do that. Now, it depends on your rates. For some, it may be less advantageous. If you had purchased it for $1,000, it would even be more. Depends on all the facts. Okay, I'm just throwing a couple of odd things now. So medical expenses, they are deductible, but generally you don't get a deduction. Why? Because unless they exceed 7.5% of your gross income, and you hope that never comes up because that means you are a sick person, right? You don't get the advantage. However, if you have a business and your business is a C corporation, that's important, it can't be an S corporation, then your C corporation can establish a medical plan and all your medical expenses, whatever they are, not just your medical premium, would all be deductible. Okay. Now the only problem is if you have employees there, you have to cover the employees also. Okay, now, Roth IRA, an IRA is something which most of you know, I think, that when you put money in an IRA, you get a deduction. But when you take it out, or when your children take it out, you have to pay income tax. Okay. However, you can convert it into a Roth IRA, meaning while you are alive, you can say, I don't mind paying the tax now. I'll withdraw from the IRA, right? Pay the income tax now. Put it in a Roth IRA, because from now on, whatever grows in the Roth IRA, including the amount you put in, will never be taxed to me or my children. So that's a good device. However, most people will say, why should I pay income tax now just to get it tax-free later on? And the answer is, you may be right. It may not make sense for most people. But sometimes what happens is, you might be in a year, especially if you're in a business, that your business income is very low, and your other deductions, like your mortgage interest on your personal home, etc., is so large that you almost end up with no taxable income. That's a year when you want to withdraw from your IRA. Let it be taxable, but it will be taxed at a low rate. And the beauty of this is that when you convert it, let's say I put General Motors stock, which was in IRA, into the Roth IRA. And the General Motors stock went down. Before my return for that year is filed, if it goes down, I didn't make a good choice, right? Because the tax would normally be payable on the value at the date I took it out. And now it has gone down in value. So what I can do is I can put it back, reconvert it back to the original IRA and not lose that benefit and wait for another year to do that transaction. Obviously, if the stock has gone up, you have done the right thing. And I believe my last slide, if there is any, no, there's no last slide. So I think the time is probably up also.
Thank you very much, Tehemtan. A small token of appreciation.
Thank you.
A plaque for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause for our excellent speakers.